All right, good morning, delegates. My name is Sarthak, and I'm actually the Secretary General for SOMUN 2023. So now I'll be taking your orientation session, and I'm sure this video is going to be available on the website and also on the YouTube link. So this is going to be a brief orientation session where you get a basic idea about all the rules of procedure, about how you are going to speak. Basically, you'll understand what an MUN is. So let's start off with that. So what are the 4 steps to becoming a Munner? You pick a conference, then you pick a committee, then you pick a country, and then simple, you become a diplomat. So in MUN, the basic step is to get a committee and a country. So that basically means you're selecting a committee with a particular agenda, or to say a topic, and you're representing a country, and you're showing the country's stance with regards to that agenda. So this is a mock United Nations, or you can also call it a model United Nations. And I'm sure you're all aware of how things go in a United Nations conference. Various topics come up, and delegates from different countries put forward their country's stance and how they would like to tackle that issue or what their opinion is on that issue. So that's exactly what we are doing in our MUN, but on a much smaller scale. So these are the different points under each of these steps, which I would not be going through right now. But however, you can pause the video and go through them if you want to. So what is the standard scoring criteria at an MUN? So there are 6 things that will be marked upon. Number 1, your speeches. That includes your GSL speeches and your Modcock speeches. Number 2, your points. So there are multiple points and there's a particular format that's used during the MUN. So I'll clearly explain what are these points and how you use them later in the next slides. So excluding that, we have our third point, which is foreign policy and research. A country has its own foreign policy. For example, if we take India into consideration, there are certain countries that we get along with and there are certain countries that we do not get along with. And this keeps changing throughout the year. For example, recently there have been issues between Canada and India that clearly shows that we aren't very friendly with Canada right now. So that means during the MUN, you couldn't partner up with Canada if you want. This is just an example, delegate. Do not take this into actual consideration. And also upon your research. So research-wise, there are certain things that you need to cover, which again, I'll be covering in the coming up slides. So for the 4th point, we have what is called as lobbying. Lobbying is nothing but socializing. I mean, it's an unofficial word for socializing. A more official word for socializing. So during the MUN, you need to discuss with students from different schools, basically delegates which represent different country. You need to get them on your side. You need to get their consensus. Basically, you need to form a team. So it's all about the way you convince people. And that's exactly what lobbying is all about. Now for the 5th part, we have what is called as documentation. There are 2 things that will be presented throughout the conference. Number 1 is the working paper and number 2 is the draft resolution. So every committee has its own agenda and there are certain solutions that you need to come up with by the end of the MUN. So a working paper is going to be put up by your block or to say basically your team, which is going to be presented on day 1. It's a brief and summarized stance of your country members or your teammates where you present a simplified and summarized solution. And the draft resolution is more like an elaboration or explanation of the same solutions mentioned in the working paper. So a draft resolution is a clear-cut document which has all the solutions and steps that you would like to take with regards to the agenda or to say the issue being discussed in that particular committee. Now for the last part, we have what is called as position papers. But however, in SOMUN 2023, we will not be using position papers at all because we have a time constraint. And I believe if we announce that we need to get the position papers now, the delegates will be suffering a lot because we don't have much time for the conference to come up. But position paper is basically your country's name, your general stance with regards to the agenda, and a couple of solutions that you would like to tell. It's a 1-page document that has its own criteria and format that needs to be followed. Coming to the next part, I'm going to be explaining the flow of debate at an MUN. That's basically how your committee session is going to go. So we'll be starting off with what's called as roll call. And after that, there are two forms of sessions that we can use. We can either enter into a formal session or into an informal session. Formal session basically includes GSL, whereas the informal session includes the moderated caucus and the unmoderated caucus motions. Now, documentation was already explained in the previous slide. It's basically the working paper and the draft resolution. And finally, it's the voting procedure where we vote on the draft resolutions presented by the different blocks or the different teams. And the draft resolution, which has the passing majority, is the one that passes. And I repeat, delegates, there's no rule that a DR has to pass, and there's no rule that only one DR has to pass. All the DRs can pass through. In fact, I would highly recommend that all the DRs pass. That clearly shows that it was a very successful committee session. Now, throughout this entire process, debate and lobbying will continue to happen. Now, coming to the first part, which is the roll call, there are two ways that you can answer. I'm sure you're all familiar with the attendance format that we generally use. Whenever our name is called out, we say present in classrooms or something like that. But in an MUN, we have a certain speech pattern or certain way of answering. Your country's name will be called out, and you can either answer by saying present or you can say present and voting. When you say present, you can either abstain or you can vote whenever any kind of voting happens. But when you say present and voting, you do not have any option. You have to pick a side and you have to vote. You either have to go for or against those motions. But remember, how you respond here will decide how the vote you get to cast in the end. So you respond wisely. But if you are very uncertain about what to choose, just stick to present. There is not much marking that goes on with the way you answer with the roll call. Now for next, we have the formal session, or basically GSL. GSL is nothing but a general speakers list. So I'll just tell the steps one by one. In the start, the chair will ask the names for those who are wishing to address the committee. Then he or she will recognize delegates and add their names to the GSL. And once it is your turn, you have on the list, you will have 90 seconds to speak. This basically means that in a general speakers list, one of the delegates will raise a motion to enter into GSL. Or if it's up to the chair can say by the discretion of the chair, we'll be entering GSL. This generally happens at the start of the first committee session. And one more thing that I would like to remind you all is that the GSL list that is formed in the start of the committee session or will continue throughout that day. So we have a GSL list which will happen throughout the day. But again, on the second day, a different GSL list can be formed. It's up to the executive board. Now I'll tell you what exactly a GSL is. A GSL is a general speakers list where the delegate can come up, use the 90 seconds being given to him, and speak anything. You can talk about your country's positions, you can talk about the offer recommendations, you can describe your block positions, you can use the GSL to garner support or say gain support from other delegates, and you can also describe the draft resolution, etc. You can say pretty much anything in the GSL speech, so use it wisely. This is the only time you'll be allowed to speak whatever you want to speak with regards to the agenda. Now, this is exactly what a GSL is about. Now, coming to the next part, when there are yields and points, then yields are applicable in the GSL, whereas you can't raise any points during the GSL. Once you have been recognized by the chair and you've been given the chance to speak in a moderated caucus, you'll be given a time of 60 seconds or 90 seconds based on the motion raised. So if you're finished early, you'll have, for example, if you have 30 seconds left, you can either yield the rest of 30 seconds to the chair, and it's up to the chair how he wants to use it, or you can yield it to another delegate. That means if this individual speaker time for every delegate is 60 seconds and you have 30 seconds left, you can give it to your friend or ally and they'll be getting the chance to speak for 90 seconds. So you can basically yield your time to another delegate, or you can yield to points of information. Points of information is nothing but questions. Any questions with regards to the statements made by you or speeches. So that basically allows you to answer questions raised by delegates. When you say, I'm yielding my time for points of information, then the chair will take names of delegates who are wishing to ask you questions. So they'll raise their placards, certain delegates will be recognized, and they'll be allowed to ask you questions. Now you can either reply to them directly in these 30 seconds or you can reply to them via chat. The 30 seconds will be calculated based on the amount of time you take to reply. These 30 seconds won't be considered when delegates are asking you questions. Now one more thing is that there's something called yield to comments. Over here, you're allowing the delegates to make comments on your speech. So in those 30 seconds, delegates can get up and they can give a comment on your speech. You have no authority or requirement to reply to their comments. However, if you wish to, you can reply to them via chat. Now for the next part, we have what are called as points. There are basically 4 important points that you need to know. Point of personal privilege, point of parliamentary inquiry, point of information, point of order. Now the first part, point of personal privilege. Anything that's bothering you in general. For example, if you want the AC temperature to be decreased, or if you want some extra pens or notebooks near your table, or if you feel that you weren't able to hear another delegate's motion, or if the speaker isn't very clear or audible, then you can raise this point of personal privilege. Now coming to the second one, there's something called point of parliamentary inquiry. So if you have any doubt with regards to the parliamentary procedures or the MUN procedures, then you can raise this parliamentary inquiry. Now the third one is point of information. A point of information is very simple, delegates. If you have any question to another delegate or to the chair with regards to some statement made by a delegate, then you can raise a point of information. Now for the fourth one, we have what is called as point of order. A point of order is raised whenever there is a mistake by the chair with the format or with the way things are being done, or with another delegate if he is doing some wrong procedure or the way he's speaking is completely wrong, then you can raise this point of order. If there's any issue with the way things are being conducted and with regards to the format, then you can raise a point of order. Now these are the points and these are the yields. Okay. Now, as already mentioned, under informal session, there are 2 things, a moderated caucus and an unmoderated caucus. So I'll basically explain what a moderated caucus is all about. The steps are, the chairperson will ask for motions. These are nothing but proposals on what committee can do next. Then committee will vote upon each motion in order of disruption. Motion with the majority vote passes and is discussed. So I'll summarize what is explained over here. In a moderated caucus, you generally raise a motion where you want to discuss a subtopic or some topic related to the agenda. You won't be discussing the main agenda itself, but rather a subtopic. And in this moderated caucus, you talk about the subtopic that you have proposed for, your country's stance, and what's your opinion with regards to that subtopic. It can be anything with regards to that particular subtopic being raised. Now I'll also explain what this order of disruption is all about. When you compare an unmod and a mod, an unmod is considered to be more disruptive. So it's basically the number of speakers that are allowed in a particular motion. For example, if I raise a motion for a total speaker's time of 15 minutes, and if I'm allowing 60 seconds as individual speaking time, that means 15 speakers can come and speak under my motion. But again, if I raise a motion for a total speaker's time of 15 minutes and say 30 seconds individual speaking time, that means 30 speakers can fit. So based on this, since the second motion has the capacity to allocate more speakers, that will be considered more disruptive compared to this one. So first we'll be voting on the more disruptive one, basically the 30 speakers one, and then we'll vote upon the 15 speakers one. So this is all about the order of disruption. You don't need to get confused about it. Now after these motions have been raised and after we start voting based on the order of disruption, the motion with the majority vote passes. And we won't be voting on the other motions which haven't been discussed later. Basically, if one motion passes, then we won't be discussing any motions after that. So for example, the 30 speakers motion was raised. We have voted upon that first. And if it passes, we won't be voting on the second motion at all. That's exactly what this motion is all about. And that's how the voting happens. Now again, I think it's already mentioned into the right corner. Motions can be raised to introduce subtopics to the agenda, basically under moderated caucus, or we can use it to move into an unmoderated caucus. So the exact speech format to raise a motion would be like the delegate of X would like to raise a motion to discuss Y being the topic, and also X being your country, for a time period of Z. That means the total speaking time, with individual speaker time being Q. Q is the individual speaking time, which is basically per speaker how much time they're being allotted to speak or share their opinion. That's exactly what individual speaker time is all about. So the ideal way would be the delegate of Russia would like to raise a motion to discuss the Russian-Ukraine war for a time period of 15 minutes, with individual speaker time being 30 seconds. This is how you're supposed to raise a motion. Now with that, we'll be going to the next one. Now I'll explain what an unmoderated caucus is all about. If a motion for an unmoderated caucus passes, committee is no longer moderated by a chairperson for that time period. And that's exactly why we got the title unmoderated caucus. This means you can move around committee and talk to delegates one-on-one or in groups. You basically have no restrictions. You can just get up, go around the committee room, talk to different delegates. You don't have to sit, you don't have to maintain decorum. In fact, you can even shout, and I would suggest you shout because that would really piss off all the executive board members. Okay, putting all jokes aside, you can use this time to lobby and build consensus. Basically, you can build your team, get people on your side, make them vote for you for your next motions. You can basically do anything during an unmoderated caucus. And the way to raise an unmoderated caucus would be as follows. The delegate of Russia would like to raise a motion to suspend formal debate and enter into an unmoderated caucus for a total time of 20 minutes. There won't be any individual speaker time over here, but only a total time. And since unmoderated caucus is more disruptive than a mod cauc, if motions are raised for a mod cauc and an unmod cauc will be voted upon first. And that's exactly how you're supposed to raise a motion for unmod, and that's exactly what happens during an unmod. Now coming to the documentation part. As I already mentioned, there's something called as working paper, draft resolution, discussion of draft resolution, amendments, addition, alteration, deletion. Yes. So I already explained what a working paper and draft resolution is. So I'll briefly be explaining you the format. In fact, we have already put sample working papers and sample DRs in our delegate handbook. So make sure that you go through it to get a better idea about it. So under the format, we'll be expecting three things. First, we'll start off with the heading, where the committee name is mentioned. The sponsors, basically the main delegates who have made the DR or the working paper. Then the signatories, all delegates who are wishing to support this DR. And I repeat, if you're in two different blocks, there's no requirement that you can't be the signatories for both the DRs. However, you can be a sponsor for only one DR. Now, after that, we have what is called as preambulatory clauses and operative clauses. I wouldn't like to get too much into detail about that. Now, I'll be explaining what is called as discussion of draft resolution. So yeah, delegates, I'll be continuing with the discussion of the draft resolution. So once DRs have been presented by the team members, then there will be a question and answer session where members of that particular group have to come forward and answer questions being raised by other delegates. So a DR presentation has a certain limitation as to a particular number of delegates can come and present the DR, and a certain number of delegates can come and answer the Q&A sessions. So delegates who have presented the DR cannot also be a part of the Q&A team for that same DR. However, the exact number will be mentioned by the executive board, and they'll tell you how many delegates are allowed to be a part of the presentation team and how many are allowed to be a part of the question and answer session. Now, after the discussion of the draft resolution, we do amendments. This is mostly optional. However, if the committee strongly believes that certain amendments are supposed to be made with regards to the DRs, then a motion can be raised to do amendments. And in these amendments, different delegates can come forward and mention the different changes that they want in a particular block's DR. Well, that's all there is about documentation. If you have any further doubts about documentation, then during the committee session, the executive board will definitely help you out. Going to the next slide. Yes, voting. I have already explaining the format that we generally use for voting, or basically the way you're supposed to answer at the start during the roll call. Also, one more thing, delegates. Roll call happens at the start of every committee session, and your stance for that particular committee session is taken at the start of the committee itself during the roll call. Now, voting. You can only abstain if you voted present during roll call. So that means you can avoid to vote if you have selected present during your roll call. Now, your voting stance should definitely be in line with your country's foreign policy and national interests. You can't vote for policies that go against your national interest or your foreign policy. So you can't vote for anything that opposes your country's stance and point of view. Now, once voting is done and the resolution passes, this is the documentation presentations are done and the voting for the DRs are also done and the resolution has passed saying this DR has succeeded or this DR has passed. The chair will ask for a motion to adjourn debate, and once this passes, the committee ends. So this is basically how we will be concluding the committee session itself. And that's how we will be ending the MUN with regards to the committee sessions. Now, I think I have covered all the important points about how to speak, how to vote, how to talk, what to speak. I think I've covered all the important questions. Now, moving to the next part. Yes, since this is not a live orientation, I don't think I'll be able to answer Q&As. Now, tips. I understand that it's only 1 week left for the MUN, but I think these tips will be really helpful for you. 5 tips that I would like to give you is that be interested and invested. So also be impersonal and objective. And whenever you're giving any kind of speech, start broad and then divide into the specifics. And I strongly suggest that if you're going to say something or if you're going to present your country's point of view or your stance, then stick to one particular solution or stick to one particular area under the agenda and try to provide solutions only with regards to that particular area. It clearly shows how you're unique and different from other delegates, because everyone can talk about the agenda in general, but very limited delegates give a specific answer or specific solution with unity and diversity in their solutions or presentations. So I need uniqueness. Now after that, use anchor questions so you don't get lost or sidetracked, of course. And please stay organized. And the last and the most important thing is source your information properly, because quality and credibility are extremely important in not just SOMN but in any MUN. If you get your facts wrong, then that's it. So make sure that you get your facts right and all your information is credible. And one more thing is that whenever you're going forward to give a speech or be a part of the GSL, make notes in bulletin points rather than paragraphs, because that's going to help you summarize your points better and you won't get confused. Because if you create paragraphs, then your mind will be forcing you to say the exact thing in the exact order. But if you type it in bulletin points, then you can summarize it and present it however you want to. So I strongly recommend that you make notes in bulletin points rather than paragraphs. Now, what to research? Now, what to research with regards to the committee, agenda, and country. Committee. What does your committee do? Its powers and its mandate, its history and past action. What were the key resolutions that were raised by your committee in the official United Nations team? What is it currently working on? What is your committee currently working on right now in the official UN? And what are its limitations? They're basically asking your area of operation. So make sure you're aware of your committee's area of operations. Now, with regards to the agenda, what is happening? Why is it happening? What can be expected if no one intervenes? Where is it happening? When and where did it begin? How far has it been handled so far? So basically everything with regards to your agenda, how it happened, how it started, when it happened, all the W's and H's, how, what, why, when, where, everything needs to be answered. You need to have a basic idea about every one of these questions. And also make sure that your country's official solutions with regards to that agenda and your personal solutions or your ideas are present with you at all times. because that's exactly what we are doing in an MUN. We're trying to discuss a topic and we're trying to come up with solutions for that particular topic. Now, with regards to your country, be aware of your country's history, national interests, political interests, current political affairs, international relations and foreign policy, connection to the committee, and agenda. So what is your country doing with regards to the agenda being discussed and how it's handling it? That's something very important and that's something you need to know. So these are all the basics as to what to research. Since we do not have a position paper in our MUN, I won't be explaining this. Now, important debating elements. Listen. Pay attention to every statement, every word that comes out of the mouth of an executive member or another delegate. You need to make sure that you listen to everyone around you as much as you can. Because you can only make strong points and strong statements and correct someone if you listen. So make sure that you listen to each and every member of the committee. Now, one more thing is that, is your country interested in securing or furthering national interests? Craft your speeches and approach accordingly. You need to have a good idea about your country's national interests. That's basically what this is all about. Now change your approach based on the stage of committee you're in. Introduction, deliberation, block formation, etc. Basically, you need to be aware as to what your committee is doing right now. For example, with the start of the committee, we would be discussing the issue in general. But whereas if it's the end of the committee or the end of the MUN, the final committee sessions, then you're discussing the solutions. So you need to have a clear idea as to what is happening and at which time it is happening. Now, the most important part, according to me, is be diplomatic, even in disagreement. Diplomacy is something very important in not just SMN, but in any MUN. So maintain diplomacy at all times. So be diplomatic. Now supplement speeches with just the right amount of facts, figures, statistic quotes. Most of the times, delegates tend to give too many facts, too many numbers, and too many quotes. And that's not really a good thing. So make sure that you have a perfect balance between the amount of Googled or internet facts and your personal opinion. There needs to be a perfect balance between both of those. Now, one more thing is, use non-verbal communication to capture your audience attention. So your body language is something very important. Whenever you go up to the podium, everyone will not just be observing the way you speak, but also your body language. So make sure that you maintain good body posture and have the perfect body language throughout the committee sessions. Now also find common ground and keep reiterating. As already mentioned, stick to certain specifics and create a strong stance on this particular specifics. Now, important lobbying elements. Find allies and countries with similar interests. That's step number 1. Prepare a list of solutions beforehand to discuss with them, preferably even a draft resolution. And I think I've already received some messages from delegates saying they've prepared a DR already, and I'm really impressed with the delegates who have done that. I appreciate you, by the way. So if you have a basic idea of the solutions that you would like to present, then it would be easier for you to lobby because you can discuss with other delegates, and other delegates who have a similar opinion or similar solution, you can come forward and form a block together. That's something very important. Now start by enrolling a few and then split up and enroll more. So for example, if you're one delegate and if you saw another delegate, first talk to them, communicate with them, come together, form a block. Then each one of you go out, find 2 more delegates. Like that, you need to keep expanding. You always start small and then you expand. Now again, this point has already been mentioned before. And yeah, indirectly lobby as well through your speeches, polls and comments and etc. So whenever you go up, even during a mod COC or even during the GSL, your speeches need to be in such a way that they attract other delegates. You need to give them a reason to be under your leadership or be a part of your block. That's something very important. So be careful about the way you speak. Factor in the needs of others in your block. Compromise if possible. Try to make sure that everyone's opinion is respected and valued in your block. Now speak up and take the lead, but also listen and divide work so that others also feel included. Okay, now that we're done with that, alright, I think that's the end of the PPT. So delegates, if you have any further questions or queries with regards to whatever I've just spoken, you can always contact me at secretarygeneral.somanhyd@gmail.com. I'll be putting forward my Gmail under my photo in the secretariat team. So it will be available in the website so that you can contact me anytime. And excluding that, I'm assuming I was able to give you a basic idea about MUN procedure and how you're supposed to speak. So I wish you all the best. And I'm really, really excited to see you all at SOMUN 2023 on this November 4th and 5th. So you still have 1 week time. So make sure that you prepare well. And I'm hoping this orientation video was really helpful. Thank you, delegates. Looking forward to see you at the MUN.